wore a vision. A common tale with an uncommon outcome. The Parana system was on the very fringes of imperial space, the very footstep to the maddening realms outside of the order and protection of the Emperor of Mankind. And living was hard. One Xenos race after another had attempted to snatch this pearl for their own burgeoning empires. But none had managed this in all the millennia since it had been claimed by the forces of the Great Crusade. In all that time, in all of those 10,000 years or more, the worlds of Parana had held firm. But this now seemed in doubt. A force of mercenaries had been hired by a local despot somewhere out in the inky cold of the void. They had come in hard and had made their impact felt almost immediately. Kroot, the warriors so oft found in the shadows of the Tau Advance, this particular collection of them had not bent the knee, had not hired themselves out to the forces of the greater good. And they did what they did best. They fought, and they died. But they did it not just for spoils, booty, or even just the carnage. They did it because they enjoyed the challenge. For these were Kroot, and they fought like madmen. The initial waves had come down all across the system, all across the worlds therein. They were disciplined and organized of a sort. When one watched their movements and their camps, it was hard to believe they were anything other than base things of rage and slaughter. They were pandemonium. But therein lay the problem. For their visage and their camps gave the impression of barbarism, of stupidity, of base feral rage. But when they hit the battlefield, the Kroot were a well-oiled machine, a machine that crushed all before them. The planetary defense forces did what they could, matching skill with numbers, but it was soon going all the Kroot way. Distress calls had elicited the rarest of things, the most welcome of responses. For a battle barge erupted from the Mandeville Point and made full speed toward the central worlds of Parana. A full company of the Obsidian Glaze Chapter of Space Marines had arrived, and they had brought the wrath of the Emperor with them. They dropped down to the planet, and instantly went to the glorious work of the Emperor, bringing his peace to the Xenos scum. And all was within expected parameters. They were cleaning their Kroot's clocks. Well, they were, until the Kroot managed to take a few of the Marines. Not even alive, just their bodies. And they consumed them. They ate every scrap of the Marines, and as the Marines do to others, they ingested their very spirits, their memories, their abilities, their ways of war. And from that point on, the battles became far too even. The Obsidian Glaze deployed standard Codex Astartes tactics, as they always did. But this time, it was not to their advantage. When they advanced according to the Codex, they fell into traps. When they held, they did so with conventional patterns, but were overrun. But the Kroot forces seemed able to second-guess their every move, their every counter, as if by ingesting the Marines they had captured, they had ingested the very fundamentals of the Codex. Within 2 weeks of near-constant battle, constant losses, the Obsidian Glaze were forced to withdraw or face annihilation and the loss of their precious gene seed. Of course, the seed being more important than any world or even system. With a black mark on their glowing resume, the Obsidian Glaze had no choice but to depart. But as they did, they sent out a transmission of their own, only to Astartes, only to Space Marines. The sheer honor they displayed in this missive brought a tear to many who heard it. For it was a proclamation from this proud chapter of Ultramarine Successors that they had failed. They called for other chapters to engage. They admitted their defeat boldly. Few who heard the message sneered, so candid and open was the missive. But it did elicit a response, and a strong one. In the next month, The Kroot took hard point after hard point, city after city, region after region in the Parana system, and all seemed lost. But this was as far from the truth as can be imagined. For in that month, there were indeed forces of the Imperium who had listened, who had taken up the chalice unwillingly passed from the obsidian glaives. In all that time, a force had been watching the Kroot, observing their deployments, recording their movements, identifying their leaders and centers of supply. And then, they struck. Space Marines in drab green were barely seen at the fringes of combat, sniping out officers, taking off the heads of Kroot heroes. They hit and faded, corralling Kroot into situations where everything they knew, everything in the Codex, meant they should be able to predict the thrusts of their Marine adversaries and crush them. But the battles never played out this way. Their leadership decimated, their morale crushed, their supply lines destroyed in endless strikes that were never prevented or even caught after the fact. The Kroot were losing, and badly. Only at the end, when the last vestiges of the Kroot elite were mustering, gathering themselves into one valley to defend themselves from these spectral rays that culled them from the shadows, only then did they see the enemy properly. Green-painted power-armored Marines, a white hawk's head on their pauldrons. They burst from every angle, every possible direction. The Raptors were here. Their drop pods slammed into the center of the Kroot as the fringes were pushed back into the center by endless sniping and long-range bolt rifle fire. And the slaughter was the work of a full day and night, chainswords whirring as they went about their business. As dawn rose on the following day, there was not one Kroot remaining inside the valley alive. And the remaining wandering tribes on the Platte were sitting ducks for well-coordinated sweeping culls from the PDF. Without a single loss, without a single defeat, the Raptors had taken back the Parana system. Welcome, gentle listener. I am Baldermort, your faithful servant, and I wish to introduce you to the forces, factions, and units of the Warhammer 40k universe, the grim darkness of the far future, where there is no time for peace. There is only time for war. And today, we shall be taking a brief look at the most voted for and interesting Successor Chapter. Of course, I can only be speaking of the Raptors Chapter. Brave scions of Corvus Corax, they are lethal, yet like ghosts, for they do not adhere to the warrior culture of most of their brethren. And so, as usual, for the very basics, let us lean on existing wisdom. To quote, the Raptors Chapter. Before seeking victory, first make yourself invulnerable to defeat. Primarch Corvus Corax, Meditations upon War and Shadow. The Raptors are a loyalist Space Marine chapter and a second founding successor of the Ravenguard. It has been heavily involved in many of the most recent campaigns of the Imperium of Man, including the Badab War, the Third War for Armageddon, and the Taros campaign. Side note, we shall not be going into the Badab War this time. As a chapter, the Raptors have been nearly rendered extinct multiple times, but have learned to adapt to changing circumstances so well that they have flourished where other chapters would simply have had their names added to the ranks of the fallen. The Raptors chapter culture is one that is very wary of the idea of martial glory or honor, and prefers instead to emphasize pragmatism, adaptability, and completion of the mission over all other concerns. The Raptors, having been reduced to so few battle brothers so often in their history, have no illusions about what war truly is. They understand that war is suffering and death. It is a brutal business that they specialize in, but they have no desire to wallow in its misery beyond what is required to carry out the Emperor's will. The Raptors chapter has constantly faced and overcome tragedies throughout its 10 millennia history, These begin with the disasters that afflicted the Ravenguard Legion prior to its founding, and extend to the destruction of its homeworld, and extend to the annihilation of its homeworld, and repeated instances of near destruction. The Raptors' success is dependent upon their ability to think and execute in a distributed and independent fashion. The Raptors willingly employ whatever tactics they believe most appropriate, relying upon success to establish their chapter's glory rather than misguided notions of honor and dogmatic thought. The Raptors prize skilled marksmanship and independent thought, and view the Codex Astartes as a highly effective set of guidelines rather than absolute doctrine like many other chapters. The Raptors are known for fielding substantial 10th Company assets supported by waves of combat skimmers. Chapter History. The Raptors are a successor chapter of the second founding. The Raptors are descendants of a handful of scions of the Ravenguard, who were created as a new chapter after the dark days of the Horus Heresy. Apocryphal legend suggests that the Raptors were originally drawn from a company of new initiates training on the Ravenguard homeworld of Deliverance at the time of the infamous drop site massacre of his Turn 5 that nearly wiped out the Ravenguard Legion, allowing only the Primarch Corvus Corax and several thousand of his Astartes to survive. These initiates were also spared some of the darker events, including rampant mutation that befell their legion as the Ravenguard attempted to rebuild itself too quickly under Corax's direction. In the heresy's aftermath, this company went on to serve with distinction against the remnants of the forces of chaos, and was later granted the honor of full chapter status after Reboot Gilliman's reforms of the Space Marine legions and the use of the Codex Astartes was imposed on those forces, breaking them into smaller chapters. Fragmentary evidence suggests that the fledgling Raptor Chapter began its service as a fleet-based chapter in the middle of the 31st millennium, engaging in the pursuit of the scattered traitor legions during the Great Scouring that followed the end of the heresy. Several standard centuries later, the Raptors were granted a world on the edge of the Eye of Terror, in the Segmentum Obscurus, joining numerous other chapters to share the responsibility as guardians against chaos from the Great Rift into Imperial space. All signs suggest that the chapter served capably in fulfilling its responsibilities for millennia. However, the chapter's history is then obscured by the passage of the ages, as its first homeworld, whose name is now lost, was believed to have been destroyed during one of Abaddon the Despoiler's Black Crusades, likely the 4th or 5th Black Crusade. The disaster occurred in either the 34th or the 36th millennium. With the world's destruction, all of the chapter's early trophies, records, and much of its most valuable and ancient war gear were all annihilated. In the 37th millennium, Imperial records indicate that the entire Raptors chapter was listed among those Space Marines who had gone missing and were presumed killed in action. All signs indicate that the Raptors maintained this status for more than 2 standard millennia. The cause behind this disappearance is unclear and lost to the ages. It was not until the Cabiriad Wars of the early 39th millennium that the Raptors resumed their status as a full-strength Space Marine chapter. Their actions during the intervening millennia are unclear. The chapter may have been rebuilt from a substantial loss, or it may have spent this time fighting in and escaping from the terrors of the warp. Regardless, at this point, one key element of the Raptors' incarnation became clear. During the Cabiriad Wars, the Raptors had access to an ample supply line. References from other Imperial sources indicate that they have more than once taken a homeworld and re-established a fortress monastery they refer to as Prime. The Raptors currently operate from a world variously named Numina, Ra, or Badwater, from deep within the dense stellar drifts of the Sutter's Spiral Nebula on the northern border of the Segmentum Solar. However, none of the Battle Brothers have disclosed the name or precise location of their homeworld, even to members of the Adeptus Administratum. The Raptors pride themselves on extreme zeal for the Emperor of Mankind, but their reckless disregard for the Codex Astartes is legendary, according to Captain Ardias of the Ultramarines. Chapter Organization. The Raptors maintain a high degree of flexibility in their deployments and structure. and in battle favour hit-and-run tactics over all else. Raptor Librarians. Like their fellow Astartes chapters, the Raptors also maintain a Librarius of potent psychers who are highly talented and trained to master the power of the warp at the highest level. Each chapter selects its Librarius in its own way, either from seed worlds, as it does with the bulk of its initiates, or from the ranks of gifted psychers brought to the Scholastica Psychana of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica. More chapters train and test chosen psychers following the ancient doctrines laid down in the Codex Astartes. Librarians of the Raptors Chapter are trained in this way, and with few minor traditional variances, have been taught to live by the word of the Codex. Raptor Librarians have a number of unique psychic abilities only used by the psychers of their chapter, including Librarian Farsight. The Librarian calls upon his psychic gifts to enhance his vision and grant himself a hunter's gaze, which can sweep across the battlefield to find targets. This keen sight not only allows the Librarian to pick out targets at extreme ranges, but also thwarts their attempts to hide, differentiating shadows from within shadow to see those who are trying to hide from him. In addition, his enhanced sight allows him to see things much closer than they would normally appear. This ability can also be used to see fine detail from the same distance which normal sight might not be able to see. This power only works when the Librarian is using his own vision, and does not function in conjunction with scopes or lenses which would enhance ranged vision. Raptors' Wings. Raptors have an affinity for striking from the sky, making extensive use of jump packs and land speeders to descend on their foes from unexpected angles. The Librarian can manifest great wings of psychic power, which bear him aloft. While active, others will be able to see the Librarian's wings as crackling green nimbuses of energy that arc up over his shoulders and can make it very difficult for him to hide. Also, when he moves, if the wings brush against any surface, they will crackle and burn with contained warp energy, though the surface or objects they touch suffer no harm. Screaming Eagles. The Raptor's Librarian can summon forth a swarm of shadowy birds of prey from the warp, which rise up from the ground screaming for the blood of his enemies. This power also has the effect of creating a brief cloud of darkness when the ethereal birds spring from the ground, and, though not complete darkness, this does foul vision and cast a shadow over the area of effect, as thousands of black beating wings arc skyward. Chapter Homeworld. The Raptors are quite deliberately vague in any discussion of their homeworld. This is among their fellow battle brothers, as well as in discussions with outsiders. It is in their nature to be secretive, and to value the careful application of stealth. The fact that the Raptors lost their first homeworld only serves to intensify this concern. The safe preservation of their adopted home is clearly a priority for the Raptors. However, this has become a point of contention with the Adeptus Administratum, the chapter. Not only could this act of independence have heretical consequences, but it effectively complicates any communication between Terra and the chapter. The name of the Raptors' fortress monastery is also kept a secret by the chapter, who generally refer to it simply as Prime. Chapter Combat Doctrine. The Raptors are known for shunning the glory of close-quarter combat, favoured by many other chapters, for the simple expediency of the clean kill from afar with ranged weapons. Like their parent chapter, the Ravenguard, the Raptors make extensive use of their scout marines dispersed throughout their task forces, and maintain a sizable contingent of land speeders of all types, as well as a corps of diverse armoured vehicles. They prefer to employ these assets, along with their assault units, in precision strikes to overwhelm an enemy at strategically crucial junctures in battle, after determining the most effective pressure point at which to break the enemy. Flexibility and willingness to adapt to their situation represents the core of the Raptors' combat doctrine. As they prepare to engage their opponents, these Space Marines are always careful to identify all of their assets and utilize them to the fullest means possible. These often include assets that are not identified within the constraints of the Codex Astartes. Even when operating well within the structure of that tome, these battle brothers may choose to take measures that others might consider dishonourable. For members of the Raptors Chapter, the only important standard is success. Honour and glory are noble notions, but a clear victory is worth far more than any amount of either. Most of the distinctive combat tactics that the Raptors employ are tied into this notion. Many Space Marine chapters exhibit a clear disdain for the use of concealment, secrecy, espionage, and counterintelligence. The Raptors know, however, that such tactics provide a limited number of countermeasures to overcome those who would use such deception against members of the Adeptus Astartes. However, the Raptors Chapter enthusiastically and consistently applies these techniques throughout its battles. Deceiving their opponent as to the timing, nature, and objectives of an attack can often grant the Space Marines a significant tactical advantage. Similarly, by expertly scouting a region prior to launching an attack, the Raptors are often able to insert their forces without their opponents realizing the number or nature of the opposing forces. However, such insertions are entirely dependent upon the reliability and accuracy of their initial reconnaissance work. This requires extensive dependence upon their Scout Marine units, which exceed the level characteristic of many other Space Marine chapters. When engaged in scouting missions, the chapter's battle brothers typically focus on both gathering intelligence and on countering the opposition's efforts. Such as they work to penetrate the fog of war, they may also deliver false but credible information. Consequently, at the same time as the Space Marines penetrate directly to the most vulnerable points of their opponent's strategy, those opponents are unable to locate the heart of the Raptors' force. This stratagem has often enabled the Raptors to effectively engage opponents that enjoy an even greater numerical advantage than is typical for Imperial Space Marine forces. In keeping with their willingness to make use of every available resource, the Raptors Chapter often takes direct charge of any Astra Militarum units available in a given theatre. Rather than deferring to the organization's intrinsic leadership, these Space Marines deploy their members among their merely human forces and then take a direct hand in their disposition and tactics. During the course of an engagement, there are two favoured elements to any plan that these battle brothers are likely to enact. The first is a supreme reliance upon their marksmanship. It is unclear if enhanced marksmanship is an innate element of the Raptors' gene seed, or simply a consequence of their training. In either case, these Space Marines are highly skilled sharpshooters, even by the exceptionally high standards of the Adeptus Astartes. The second core stratagem is the use of the hit-and-run tactic. The Raptors Chapter is exceptionally well equipped with assault bikes, land speeders, and jump packs. Whenever possible, these Space Marines favour the use of guerrilla tactics and ambushes to deplete enemy forces prior to a more traditional engagement. Millennia of refining their techniques has enhanced their abilities to the point that these battle brothers are often able to decimate enemy forces through precision surgical strikes, minimizing the enemy forces present in future conflicts. When these tactics are considered in combination with their extraordinary marksmanship, it is not surprising that some have likened the chapter to Space Marine assassins. In keeping with the value that these Space Marines place upon independent thought, each of the Raptors companies operates on a largely independent basis. It is only in reaction to a particularly dire threat that multiple companies gather to cooperate. For the last few millennia, they have fought across the breadth of the Imperium, wherever they have been needed. Chapter Beliefs. As a chapter, the Raptors have been brought to the brink of extinction several times, but yet have managed to endure and return to full strength when other chapters would have been destroyed. They have a remarkably grim determination to survive, and one of the Raptors' hallmarks is the ability to adapt to changing circumstance and respond swiftly to the fortunes or misfortunes of war. When faced with insurmountable odds, the Raptors manifest the ability to bend rather than break, and to change their tactics and withdraw to fight again, where more prideful chapters would perhaps choose to stand and die. The Raptors value the art of concealment and utilize secrecy and surprise as paramount weapons in their arsenal. As a result, they have always cultivated in themselves an ability to see clearly through the fog of war and strike at the hidden heart of the enemy, where they can inflict the most damage and achieve their objectives undistracted by hubris or hidden dogma. In order to attain such a goal, the chapter's battle brothers are trained in a variety of ways that are remarkably inconsistent with most other Space Marine chapters. Ultimately, the Raptors chapter is focused upon success in all of its endeavours. Failure is never an acceptable option, but neither is an approach that needlessly throws away the lives of battle brothers or irreplaceable war gear. When an objective is identified, those Space Marines pursue that goal relentlessly. However, their tactics are seldom direct. They study a situation intently so that they may accomplish their goal with a minimum of risk. This outlook has often caused tension during those missions where the Raptors have worked closely with Space Marines of other chapters. On more than one occasion, the Raptors have been accused of cowardice by other Adeptus Astartes formations. Members of the Raptors do not look kindly upon such accusations, but they seldom take such insults as a major affront. For their part, the Raptors consider the most orthodox chapters to be blind adherents to tradition. While they seldom instigate such rivalry, they accept it, and reluctantly participate in it when such actions do not interfere with accomplishing their objectives. Flexibility also plays a key role in their decision-making process. Conditions in the field often change with alarming speed. Before a Space Marine of the Raptors chapter can assume an officer's responsibilities, he is thoroughly trained in all aspects of battlefield awareness and observation. Tactical cognizance and strategic prioritization play crucial roles at every level of command. These battle brothers are expected to identify any changes that occur through the course of a battle, including unexpected enemy response, at the earliest stages and act upon them accordingly. Throughout the chapter, blind obedience is strongly discouraged. All of these Space Marines are expected to act upon their own initiative at the appropriate times. However, such actions must fit within the context of the larger battle scheme. Battle brothers consider unorthodox tactics during their preparation for any conflict. These include unusual deployment maneuvers and infiltration. At times, they have gone so far as to assemble ad hoc units specifically appropriate for resolving a particular tactical problem. In this way, Battle Brothers of the Raptors chapter will concede the articles of faith and honor in the name of victory. They also willingly concede minor objectives in the interest of achieving overall military success. This idea is foreign to many of the other chapters of the Adeptus Astartes, but well within the goal-focused flexibility of the Raptors. Their continued focus on the overall conflict and goals rather than individual honor or glory is key to propagating this ideal among the chapter's battle brothers. At various times during their history, the Raptors have almost faced extinction, but the chapter has nevertheless continued to function, rebuild, and once more face its enemies. It is a part of the Raptor mentality that the chapter will endure, no matter the cost, and that the eventual destruction and rebuilding of all chapters in the Adeptus Astartes is inevitable. As one battle brother dies, another takes his place to continue the endless struggle where the gene seed lives on, but the warrior does not. Death is the only constant in the universe, and regardless of victory or defeat, it is the only true reward a battle brother can look forward to. Quite apart from casting a dark cloud over the battle brothers of the Raptors chapter, this outlook fills them with stoic pragmatism to face everything that the universe can throw at them, to fulfill their duty until they eventually die, and another takes their place. The galaxy and its many horrors hold no surprises for them, and they know that somewhere out there, amongst the inky black, is a piece of ground where they will fall, having served their emperor and held back the night that seeks to consume humanity, at least for a brief time. Other chapters can find these attitudes at odds with a strong devotion to the Emperor and the righteous plight of mankind. Though the Raptors see the two as intertwined, and their chapter has always done its duty and remains unquestionably loyal to the Imperium. For the Raptors, battle brothers facing death is only a matter of time, and they carry the knowledge with them every day, alongside their duty to their brothers and their oath to the Emperor. Chapter Gene Seed. Throughout their history, as we have noted, the Raptors have suffered catastrophic losses on several occasions. In spite of this, as a testament to their perseverance, they have managed to recover each time. This ability to rebuild in spite of massive losses also suggests that their gene seed is healthy and stable. Under the conditions of rebuilding, the success of each implantation into a neophyte is crucial for the chapter's survival. In spite of this, many of the genetic flaws of their progenitor chapter continue to haunt the Raptors. As with the Ravenguard, battle brothers of the Raptors chapter gradually attain an ever paler skin tone as they age. After just a few standard centuries of service, some have skin that is very nearly translucent. At the same time, their hair color darkens, so that the chapter's veterans are easily identified by their black hair and pale complexions. Again, like their progenitors, the Raptors also lack a functioning mucranoid implant. However, they do have a fully functional Betcher's gland. It is unclear if this organ's function was somehow recovered by the Raptors, or if their founding occurred prior to the Ravenguard chapter losing that organ from the standard array of Astartes organ implants. Raptors are as intensely loyal as any of the chapters of the Adeptus Astartes, and do not take their duty lightly, nor the oaths they take to the Emperor. However, they retain a fatalism which can cling to them even in their most triumphant moments. Unlike the stubborn adherent to duty that other chapters might possess, which would see a battle brother fight on until claimed by death, the Raptors have instead a grim determination to do their duty. This is not so much a desire to die, as it is an acceptance that death is the only end to the path the Space Marine treads, and everything he does is another step along that path, and one closer to his eventual demise. As this condition increases, the battle brother can become more and more fatalistic about his chances, citing the many times the Raptors have suffered near extinction, or that the Imperium itself has come close to the edge of destruction. But these black moods will not affect his willingness to do his duty, nor makes him turn from his brothers, but it can press in upon his squadmates all the same. Chapter Relics. Diomedes' Grace. Captain Diomedes of the Raptors had the finest artificers of his chapter adapt the jump pack he favoured with an advanced gravitic suspensor rig and dispersion jets to assist his manoeuvring in the jungle warfare he had mastered. The jump pack eventually made its way to the Death Watch, where it has served without equal in all manner of areas normally inaccessible by such means. Marksman Combat Site. As part of their exceptional marksman training, the Raptors stationed in the Jericho Reach have deployed a number of combat sites for use with their weapons, incorporating various aspects of standard Imperial sites, but enhanced and improved by the skills of the chapter's tech marines. A Raptor's battle brother may possess a combat site specifically developed for his own needs, one he will have trained with and adjusted to his own unique abilities. A combat site that has specifically configured for its user and will only grant its full effect to the battle brother it was intended for, its size, shape, and focus matching that battle brother's own physiology and marksman style. Chapter Colors. The Raptors primarily wear drab green power armor. Their Quilla or Imperialis on the chest guard is silver. The white squad speciality symbol on the right shoulder guard designates the Astartes tactical speciality. A black high Gothic numeral is stenciled in the center of the squad speciality symbol, which indicates squad number. A white high Gothic numeral stenciled on the right knee plate indicates company number. The chapter badge is the profile of a white raptor's head centered on a field of dull green. End quote. Now I do adore the Raptors chapter, and we shall see a lot more of their history when we cover the Badab War. But that will not be for some time yet, I would imagine. So do hit the comments section with the next chapter you would like to be spotlighted in an entry. I realize that these are not the most sumptuous of efforts, but they keep the lights on, and are wee stress busters. so I will continue to do them for the time being. I have been Baldermort, your faithful servant. If you have enjoyed this introduction to the Raptors, then do consider liking and subscribing. If you do, then hit the notifications button, as I would not want you to miss out. If you see the worth in what we are doing, then do also consider joining our Patreon. It would be a great boon. I look forward to seeing you again on Friday for more tales of cunning. No matter what you do today, do try to make some time for fun. Toodaloo.